Hello, everyone, wherever you are. Good morning or good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you for joining us on today's webinar, How Coaching Can Accelerate Development of Women Leaders. I'm Claude Werder. I'm a Senior VP and Principal Analyst here at Brandon Hall Group. I'll be kicking things off for us today. Let's start with some introductions of our great presenters. Joining me today are Leslie Tedgui and Wilma Li. Leslie is CoachHub's Head of Marketing, where she leads a global team responsible for sharing the unique value CoachHub can offer to people and companies around the world. Leslie has spent her career in the digital training and coaching field, exploring ways in which digital tools can accelerate people development, and organizational transformation. Leslie is a graduate of the Sorbonne, City University London, and the Essex Business School. Wilma is a certified professional executive and leadership coach who works with CoachHub, and she specializes in intercultural diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging. She helps leaders and organizations with inclusive leadership effectiveness by providing guidance to counter bias, cultivate psychological safety, and drive engagement to foster an inclusive climate. She has experience as a thought partner in C-suite and executive coaching in Fortune 500 companies at an individual and team level. And I want to, of course, extend a sincere thank you to CoachHub for sponsoring today's webinar. CoachHub is the leading global digital coaching platform, empowering organizations to create scalable and measurable personalized coaching programs for the entire workforce. CoachHub's global pool of coaches includes more than 3,500 certified business coaches in 90 countries across 6 continents, with coaching sessions available in over 60 languages. Serving more than 1,000 clients worldwide, CoachHub's innovative coaching programs are based on proprietary scientific research and development from its coaching lab. So thank you again to CoachHub. For those of you who aren't familiar with Brandon Hall Group, we're a research and analyst firm. We empower excellence in organizations around the world through our research and tools. Quick mention that we currently have several certification programs, what we call strategic certifications, open for enrollment, including for our certified talent management strategists, and 2 programs, one for employee champions and one for leaders in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Visit certification.brandonhall.com to learn more about how to earn that designation. Your participation in our research surveys is one of the most crucial components for our research program. And so if you have a few minutes and see any topics here on the slide that you can take a survey for, it would be greatly appreciated. Links will be available in your handout, or you can always visit brandonhall.com. All participants receive a piece of complimentary research. Now a few logistics before we get started. To ask questions, we ask that you please use the questions panel on your control bar. Today's presentation is being recorded, as you probably heard at the beginning, and we'll share a link to the recording and a PDF of the presentation via email in about 24 hours. However, if you want to download a copy of today's presentation right away, the link for this will be available in the chat in just a couple of minutes. The chat is also open for today, so we invite you to join in on today's discussion and share your thoughts. We will invite you to do so periodically. Really would love to hear your thoughts and your experiences along with our commentary and presentation. So please do that, but if you don't want to do that, simply pop in, say hello, and let us know where you're joining from today. We're really excited to have everyone. So let's get started with the presentation. So let's start with just kind of our objectives today. 4 main objectives. We'll be talking about some other things as well, obviously, but objective 1 is to demonstrate how coaching addresses the systemic barriers that have historically limited women's abilities to advance in the corporate world. We also want to show how coaching provides women with tools to become more proactive in seeking opportunities to grow and develop their executive presence, their influence, and their network. We also want to show how coaching managers builds an inclusive mindset, and that's an important part of today. And then share a really good case study from CoachHub of one company that prepared women for leadership through customized one-on-one coaching. So let's go ahead and get started. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what our research is showing on the current state of women in senior leadership. Over the past years, there's been a lot of attention paid to diversity, equity, and inclusion, of course, including gender equity. While there are certainly some great success stories out there, overall, the ratio of women to men in leadership roles really hasn't changed too much. Women actually outnumber men, as this graphic shows, in frontline leadership positions, and it's fairly even at the manager level, and even fairly strong, not as great as we would like, but fairly strong at the director level. But then as you can see on the two right-hand sets of bars, it just drops off a cliff at the senior leadership and C-suite levels. And that divide really hasn't changed significantly at all over the past 3 to 5 years. And there are many reasons behind that we're going to talk about. And Wilma, I know you've seen some issues that might be good to talk about up front here.
Yeah, some common themes or coaching topics that I often receive from coachees are usually about, self-doubt of the failure between if they apply for promotion, if they don't have 80% or 100% of the qualification, they wouldn't apply because they're doubting themselves that they're not good enough to apply for that. Whereas I believe the statistics show that men, even if they have less than 50% of qualification, they'll still apply to get that promotion, just to try it out, just to win it. So oftentimes through coaching, the women that I coach tend to realize, oh, it's actually their inner critic or their inner voice, or they're basically telling them that they're not good enough. So when they realizes that and learn how to depersonalize it, they're able to change that from holding them back into, rather than being their cheerleader, turn into a cheerleader, so it'll help them to basically go apply for that promotion or apply for that whatever they want to go for, so that they can go through that. So coaching really helps them to gain them that confidence and self-awareness as well.
Great, thanks. And Wilma's going to be sharing more themes and stories from her coaching experience as we go along. One of the things I wanted to point out quickly is many of you are from North America today. We do have some folks joining us from other parts of the world, but this gender imbalance persists in senior roles is truly a global issue. In fact, in North America, the percentage of women in senior roles is actually a little better than other parts of the world, but it's an issue everywhere. And if you work for a global company, it may very well be that you may have to change your approach or alter your approach, customize your approach, depending on where you are in the world and what the situation is and in those cultures. But it is definitely a global issue that we're trying to address here today. As I mentioned, progress in the number of senior women leaders has been modest. This data from our DEIB research shows that since the pandemic, the focus on DE&I has really intensified. There's been an increase in the number of women above the director level in 46% of organizations, which is not bad, but there's also been no change or a decrease in 54% of organizations. So we definitely have a ways to go. This is not to say that organizations are not trying. They absolutely are. I talk to organizations every day who have a variety of different programs and initiatives to try to improve gender gaps in other areas of DEIB. But as you see, there's a significant gap between the statements and intentions of organizations and the programs that actually help narrow the gap. So for instance, we asked them for their level of agreement on these three statements. And 69% of organizations said that their culture embraces women in senior leadership roles. 73%, about 3/4, said coaching is an important inclusive leadership strategy. But then we asked do they have coaching, mentorship, or sponsorship programs to prepare women for senior leadership roles, and only 26% of organizations said that they did. So now there are many factors impeding the progress, and this research graph shows some of them. As we just discussed, there are not enough targeted development programs and coaches, mentors, and sponsors. But another ongoing theme that we'll see, and I know you see, Wilma, is unconscious bias against women, which is an impediment to the advancement of women in about 48% of organizations.
Yeah, oftentimes that's not just from men, it's actually from women also as well that I've seen through my coachees, both men and women seem to have that unconscious bias against women. Oftentimes the topic will come up as, they just realize something through their spouse or through their coworkers. I said, I realize I don't like being challenged by certain leaders. They didn't know at the time what their bias was, is that certain leaders. And then when I go into the coaching process deeper to ask them, well, what kind of leaders, right? What if it's a men? We react the same. What if it's a woman? We react the same. So I use that flip technique to really get them to, is it really gender bias? And then when they realize, oh, it's actually gender bias against women, even though they're women themselves, that they're shocked at that. And we go deeper into the root cause of that through the coaching process. They realize was because of historically when they were really young, because a lot of executive leaders were born in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. A lot of them had mothers who are stay-at-home mom, and because of that, the dad is a breadwinner, and so a lot of these decisions were made through the father, the male figure. So oftentimes, if they're challenged by someone more senior than them who are women, they want to rebel against it because they're not the breadwinner or the decision maker, right? When they themselves are the executives themselves. So oftentimes, true coaching is where they heighten and enhance their self-awareness to realize, be more mindful of those unconscious bias that comes up whenever it comes up also as well.
Great, that's great insight, and we'll have more of that. And we're going to start drilling down on how coaching can really address some of these issues that Wilma's brought up. But first, we want to get a sense of where you are in your organization in terms of increasing the number of women in senior leadership roles. We want to give you a quick poll. And the question we want to ask you is simply, what is your organization doing to increase the number of women in higher level leadership roles? We'll give you a few choices. Please choose one. There's answer A would be a lot of talk, but little real action. Letter B is this is not a priority for us at this time. C, we have a strategy and we're beginning to take some steps. D, it's a high priority and we're seeing good results. And then E, that you're already world class. You're in the percentage of women represented in senior roles. So we really want to get a sense of where you are on this, and it helps us in understanding as we go through our discussion today, kind of where you're coming from and what your situation is. So we'll wait for some folks to vote a little bit more, and then we'll show some of the results here. And let's see what we have. So about a third of organizations say there's really not a lot of action, a lot of talk, but not a lot of action. It's good to see that very few organizations say this is not a priority. And about 38% have a strategy and are beginning the process, which I think is where our research shows most organizations are really trying, taking some initial steps, and are trying to find ways to get better. So hopefully we can help today. 24% say it's a high priority and we're seeing strong results. And congratulations to the 5% that are world-class in the percentage of women in senior roles. And please share some of your success stories and your thoughts and comments with us in the chat, as well as everyone else for that matter. We'd love to know where you are, some of your situations as we continue to talk. So we really want to really get into now how coaching can help close the gap. And Leslie, let's bring you in here and have you get us started.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this great introductions. And I think it's always a little bit, sweet and sour to look at these numbers that you just shared, Claude, because yes, there's progress, so we can take solace in that, but we're still very, very far from a world where women are equally represented in the organization. And all the reports say the same thing. There's still a huge gap. And as we approach senior leadership, top leadership, the number of women decrease as we get closer to the top. So there's still very much that glass ceiling in place in many organizations, and that has a lot of negative consequences. We didn't talk about the business impact of that, but we could have mentioned a lot of studies, all of the studies that show that this isn't just about, you know, human decency and valuing equality. It's also about business impact, and the more diverse the organization in terms of women leadership, but also in a broader sense of diversity, the more positive business results you can correlate. So I just wanted to also quickly underline that. And if you can go to the next slide, I wanted to talk about training and coaching and the ways that you can leverage, you know, the exchange of learning in your organization to change the culture. There's a lot of training, you know, going on in most of the world's biggest and largest organizations. They all have training programs. Some are mandatory, some are optional. Not everyone benefits from training. The common theme, though, about training is that you forget what you learn in a training course. And this is just a universal fact. There are countless studies that have also shown this. But basically, if you have to remember just one number, 75% of leadership development content is forgotten within 6 days if it's not implemented. So if you imagine sitting in a classroom for a full day, learning about, you know, how to unlock your potential when it comes to spotting unconscious bias, how to coach women towards leadership position, how to make sure that you foster equality in your teams or in your organization, you will forget 75% of what you have learned within the next 6 days if you don't have the opportunity to put it into practice right away. So the impact of training program, and I don't know how many HR people are present in this call today, HR functions, but if you're investing a lot of money in trying to coach or train your people and change your organization from inside through training, then a lot of this money might not get the best return on investment because of the impact that the time has on what you'll remember from a training course. So that's something to know from the start. And this is why today we're going to focus on coaching, which is a little bit different, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Also, I just want to say that diversity, equity, inclusion, those are so important, meaningful, multifaceted topics that a training program will not solve your DE&I issues in your organization. And I think we can all agree to that. I think we all are aware of that. It takes more, and it's something that has to be systemic and holistic in order to work. However, investing in training, investing in coaching will have the added benefit on top of the actual impact that it will have the added benefit of signaling to the whole organization, listen, we're investing. We know this is important. We're not just paying lip service. We're actually investing our dollars into those issues, and we're actually trying to make a difference through training, through coaching, whatever it is. And that's already something. So when I see a lot of you answer a lot of talk, but no action, when you're asked the question, is my organization committed to making a change in women leadership? I think this is exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about, oh, it's such an important topic, and we're dedicated into making our workplace more equal. However, we're not investing any money, or we're not putting in place actual projects, transformation projects that will have an impact. And I think that whenever there's a program aimed at developing people around those topics specifically, then you're already showing as a leader, yes, we are investing our time, our money into these questions, and that's already super important. If we go to the next slide and look a little bit at, sorry.
Yeah, do you mind if I just add a couple of things to that? Yeah.
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah, your point is well taken. We're not saying that learning isn't important, but the type of learning is really important. And the DEIB thing, learning is only the foundation. And we're still seeing organizations, and I'd love to hear from some of you if you want to drop in the chat, whether you have a strategic plan that really works on embedding the principles of DEIB across the organization, because that's really the key. The learning and continuous learning in various forms is important. You want to create awareness, but it has to be a full strategic approach that's coordinated across the organization, which can be very complex if you're dealing with large global organizations. And then real quick on the forgetting curve, we are beginning to see some signs, finally, that organizations realize that leadership training and really any kind of training like this is not effective as an event. So more organizations are creating continuous learning programs, and coaching can be a very significant part of that. And in fact, when we ask people what is the most important element for leadership training for key leaders, whether it's DEIB or anything else, is coaching. The coaching leaders is the most effective. So, Wilma, did you have anything you want to throw in before we move on?
Yeah, one common example is whenever I have a team workshop for executives or leadership development program for executives, after they do all the training, usually a week after, the ones that I have one-on-one with, the ones that the executive that had chicken feed workshop, when I usually go through the topic with them and basically you ask them, hey, what topic they brought up, let's just say, and then they said, oh, what is that model that you mentioned in that workshop, that particular slide? I don't remember what model of which slide it was. So that already proved to me that, okay, right. The majority of what they learned last week is already lost. So oftentimes the coaching helped them to reinforce that learning by either sending them that slide and it really helped them to implement it, how they can use that knowledge to implement with their topic, what they want to use that model for, let's just say, right? And then they actually will practice it, and coaching allowed them to also keep accountability. The next time, next week I meet with them, then I can ask them, hey, how did it go with trying to implement that model, right? So coaching really helps to reinforce the learning. Training brings the awareness, but coaching reinforces the action and the execution and implementation a lot. And a lot of my coaches have benefited from that as well.
Yeah,
great points.
Thanks, Wilma. That's actually a great segue into the next slide. You've already started talking about what is and what is not coaching, and I think as a coach, you're best equipped to tell us. And I know you're going to keep giving us some examples, and that's such a valuable perspective to have an actual practitioner on the call today, able to give some insight as to what's actually happening between a coach and a coachee. But if we look at it a little bit from like a more theoretical perspective, the history of coaching, I'm not going to go into the history of coaching, but it's true that sometimes there's a lot of questions asked about coaching. Is it really reliable? Can anybody be a coach? What's actually happening in a coaching session? And some people ruin it for us, like everything else. Some people pretend to be coaches when they're not, and they're just not applying the rules, and they're not just behaving in the right way, and so they kind of ruin the reputation of coaching. And of course, that's a minority, but most of coaches are professionally trained and know exactly what they're doing and have a unique methodology, which is very different from other people development techniques that you might know about. So for example, coaching is not mentoring, right? It's not at all about sharing your experience. It's actually about remaining neutral and just being in a listening mode when you're talking to your coachee. It's not consulting. So same thing, you're not going to give advice. You're not going to tell someone else, this is what you should be doing. This is how you ought to be doing it. That's not what a coach does. It's not training either. So you're not going to be teaching content. You're not explaining a method or an approach to succeed in something. It's not psychotherapy either. So you're not treating mental disorders. You're not a doctor when you're a coach. So it's a very, very different field as well. And finally, it's not performance management. So you're not explaining to the person, this is exactly what you should be doing in order to achieve your goals. So when we talk about a manager acting as a coach, it's not the same as being an actual coach, for example. It's two different things. The actual coach will not talk about performance. They will not evaluate you. However, what they will do is adopt a goal and solution-oriented approach to kind of give you the tools for yourself and make you uncover the resources within yourself to reach your goals and to actually set your own goals and your own targets and work towards those. So you will decide on the content, on the pace, and on the timing with your coach. You will speak to a neutral coach in confidence, and you will get a fresh and unique perspective on key focus areas. And the way that it's done with digital coaching, which is what we do at CoachHub, is really unique because you have a coach at the tip of your finger, and you just have to book a meeting whenever, wherever you are located in the world, any place, anywhere, anytime, and you can just have your coaching session. You can take your notes directly into the platform, and that makes it just, and also it's obviously a lot less costly than what face-to-face coaching can cost for your organization. So all in all, it's a very cost-effective but still extremely impactful solution. And it has specific benefits when it comes to DE&I that we'll talk about a little bit later in the conversation, and we'll see why coaching is actually uniquely suited to talk about and to improve D&I challenges and women leadership challenges that organizations can have. But before we get to that, I wanted to give it back over to you, Claude. You wanted to talk a little bit further about developmental coaching versus performance coaching.
Yeah, thanks. I'll be quick. And I hesitated to mention this, but I've had phone calls recently with clients and who are just getting started with coaching. And sometimes there's this real disconnect about coaching that you referenced, Leslie, and that some companies that I've worked with use coaching as kind of a code term to critique on the job performance and even starting progressive discipline if there's a performance issue. And so like I work with one organization, and whenever anybody has a significant performance issue, their HR team tells them, we need to start having coaching conversations. That is absolutely the wrong way of coaching. That's not what we're talking about. And so for those who may be earlier in their journey, I just want to be clear that we have to really define coaching, and everybody has to have a good understanding of what it is. And this slide that Leslie showed is a really good way to get those differences across. Wilma?
Yes, oftentimes with coaching also as well, it's really for professional and personal development, because we coach a person at the whole, not one part of it, right? And usually with coaching, especially with digital coaching, there are metrics involved also as well, that you can actually measure how much you improve from the beginning, middle, at the end of the coaching program. So your leader, who of course every conversation is confidential, but they do get which CoachHub does, they have an aggregate report without names to show that your line manager, oh, you have been improving during the whole program. Let's just say 6 months or a year or 3 months, depending on the length of the program. And that's when also the coachee also realized, oh, I actually did improve from my coaching. Oh, I can see that. And the line manager can see that as well, which is really helpful to measure the progression. And definitely it's not just for performance management, but really personal professional development as well, which help you grow within the organization and your career.
Yeah, actually, that's so interesting. And I think that, that's also been for HR, a big challenge is to measure the impact and the effectiveness of people development programs that they're launching in their organizations, whether it be training or coaching, in fact. And it's always very hard to kind of measure the impact. And I think that digital coaching allows you to measure that impact even more through all those platform features that you just described, Wilma. And actually at CoachHub, we're really trying to measure at every stage. So at the individual stage, how has the employee benefiting from coaching progressed? What has been his improvement or her improvement? But also at an organizational level, and we'll soon release, this is a little bit of a teasing, but we'll soon release an ROI calculator to actually that lets you input different fields of your organization. So the size, how many employees would benefit from coaching, how much you would invest, et cetera. And that would calculate the return on investment that you would get out of creating a coaching program. And this is done through very rigorous scientific metrics. And so we're actually at a stage now when we can talk about return on investment confidently when we look at coaching programs. And I think that's essential for business leaders to be able to actually measure what has been the impact. But the question around metrics is really interesting, and maybe we can talk about it more also towards the end of the webinar. So if we go to the next slide for now. So concretely, how do we support women in leadership through coaching? Because this is the theme of today's webinar. This is what you all came for. So concretely, what can you do? First of all, I want to recognize that women often face very strong headwinds and cultural bias in the workplace, right? We've already started talking about it a little bit. Wilma, you touched upon that earlier in the call. And we see the numbers. So obviously, we see the reality of the situation that because of those headwinds and biases and just cultural heritage that we have in most of the workplaces, we don't see women attaining leadership roles at the same pace as men. And so the development and retention of women in leadership is not where it should be. And as I mentioned earlier, it's critical for business. It's something that is not just about doing the right thing, but it's also something that has benefit, because the more diversity, the more performance organizations can reach. So coaching programs on this topic have especially been proven to be a powerful tool, because I think the main reason why is the focus on the individual. And this is where I want to really stress the fact that coaching has a does not have a one-size-fits-all approach that traditional learning or training can have. And it's the method, the perfect method to focus on the individual and to really deep dive into what is a person specific issues or specific challenges or specific limiting beliefs or specific fears, and you will address that in your coaching sessions over a long period of time. And by working and unraveling all of those little pieces that make each of us unique, it has a direct impact on progressing an organizations. So if we look at the typical challenges on the right side of the slide that women typically face in the workplace, first of all, you have gender bias, obviously. So unconscious bias and undue burden from caregiving responsibilities that just set women aside a little bit in their careers. And with coaching, you can really create an inclusive culture and environment that allow each woman to tap into their potential. You have the imposter syndrome, and this is something that we also touched upon at the beginning of the call, because of many reasons that I'm not going to address today because we wouldn't have the time, but cultural heritage reasons, but also, the way the workplace was built, the way interviews are set up, the way promotions are obtained. For all of these many factors and reasons, women often feel inadequate, despite evidence to the contrary, and so don't necessarily apply for or raise their hands to be recognized, to get a promotion, to get visibility in the workplace. And to answer to that issue specifically, coaching will provide an environment of psychological safety, a safe, holistic environment to close that confidence gap that you can work through with your coach in a space of total non-judgment, where you can express everything that you feel, where you can be yourself 100% and work on that imposter syndrome and kind of learn how to deal with it and to shut it down when it needs to be shut down. And finally, the professional network. So gender network gap, limiting the access to leadership opportunity. And this is, again, kind of how the game is played in corporate worlds, where, the organization has been built by men historically, and the rules and the codes are typically more masculine. How do you kind of adapt to that as a woman in the workplace? How do you learn about leadership advocacy? How do you promote equitable access to opportunities and advocate for work visibility? This is also something that is done in coaching. And what's really unique about coaching, and this is something I touched upon a little bit earlier in the call, is that whenever you see coaching programs dedicated to women in the workplace, it means that there has been an investment coming from the organization that has decided to invest time, resources into creating those coaching programs for women. So there is an investment coming from the organization. At the same time, there is also a strong investment coming from each individual that will go through a coaching program. I don't know if any of you in the call today have been coached, if you've had coaching experience in the past. But what I can tell you is that it's not always easy. It can be very challenging. It can be a moment of intense self-reflection, of intense putting everything into question, your beliefs, your vision of life. It can be a bit shattering. And it requires a lot of investment from women, and so you take out of it what you put in. So whenever there's those types of program put into place in the organization, you have that good show of faith from both sides. You have that show of faith from the company that's saying, yes, we're investing in our women, we're investing in our talent, we're putting coaching into place to really support them. And you have that investment from individual contributors, from high potentials, from future leaders that are saying, I'm also willing to work on myself and to invest that time and that energy into a coaching session because I want to grow and I want to keep progressing in this organization. And so that kind of meet me in the middle aspect of things, I think, is also extremely powerful and very holistic. And when it's visible in the organization, it really has the power to change things.
Yeah, definitely. And talking about imposter syndrome, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of times imposter syndrome actually stems from having a really severe inner critic or inner voice that's really telling you that you're not good enough, or the coachee is not good enough. And oftentimes when coaching helps is to really addresses that and turn that into more of a cheerleader to help you to be able to grow in your career and get that promotion. Now, in terms of psychological safety, oftentimes I get a lot of leaders ask me, hey, how do you make sure they have my team has psychological safety, right? Or everyone has a voice, no matter the cultural background or if it's introvert, extrovert, or different ethnicity or gender. Oftentimes through coaching, they realize, oh, if I just make it anonymous, let's just say an anonymous ballot box in the office, if it's on site at the office, then they can basically type in their feedback or whatever they want into the ballot box. Or if the leader set the expectation that, hey, I want the team to brainstorm ideas, so put your ideas in the ballot box separately, and then by this date, and I can put it all together and present it to you all what the ideas are, and then you can prioritize and use the same ballot box. Now, if it's virtual, of course, you can use always SurveyMonkeys as also anonymous, or a combination of both if it's hybrid situation. And that oftentimes allow the audience, no matter if they're a new immigrant or from a culture where it's more authoritarian leadership, they're afraid to voice out any ideas because of fear of repercussion, retaliation, or judgment, then it allows them to really be themselves and have a voice. And even introvert, they don't have to talk in the meeting. They just need to submit their ideas in the ballot box or SurveyMonkeys. It often really helps them to have that psychological safety, and has worked really well with a lot of my coachees who have implemented that and found that very, very useful to have that psychological safety.
Yeah, absolutely. Fully agree on everything that you just described, Wilma. So maybe we can go to the next slide and
Sure.
so we'll continue our conversation on that. And I just see on the right that Elsa, you have a friend that could not attend the webinar, and will it be possible to see it again? So maybe you can just answer that the webinar is being recorded, so we'll be able to access the recording at the end of the call. All right, so how does digital coaching support inclusive leadership development? I don't want to get into detail for every single one of those points, but I do want to say that there's a really holistic approach when it comes to coaching that actually supports inclusive leadership development throughout the different stages of this leadership development in the organization. So first of all, you're helping leaders forming inclusive styles with coaching. And this is really important. When we talk about developing women in leadership, and this actually touches upon a question that was asked in the Q&A, how do you suggest a woman can flag herself as a high potential, or does it have to come from external observations? That actually really relates to that point, because you have to also empower not just the women, but the managers, who oftentimes are men, right? As we've seen, because women are less represented in management positions. So you have to empower also the managers, the men in the organization, to kind of let go of their unconscious biases and to be able to see, hopefully, their women talent and potential high potentials for what they truly are, for all that they bring to the table, and not and not dismiss that because they haven't let go of their personal biases and limitations. So with coaching, you actually have a lot of impact to work on this and to not only empower the women maybe to let go of their imposter syndrome and to raise their hands more, but also to let go all of the men and to turn them into allies and to turn them into supporters of the women, because women leadership is not a woman's problem. It's not a woman's issue, right? It's something that has to be owned and carried by everybody. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So this is especially impactful with that regards, because as we mentioned, during the coaching session, you talk about how you see the world, how you see things around you, and your coach will help you sometimes deconstruct, always by asking questions and by doing it in a very supportive way, but still sometimes deconstruct some things that might not be objective that you might carry with you. So as I mentioned, you'll explore and learn about biases and reflect upon biases in a safe space, whether you are a people leader, whether you are in a place of making hiring or promotional decisions for people in your organization, or whether you are yourself looking forward to, looking at that next opportunity, that next career move, that next promotion. You will question attitudes and behaviors with regard to leadership style, and that can be your own or others. You will think about, okay, how do I react to a certain type of leadership? How do I behave myself in meetings? How do I evaluate certain attitudes when they come from men or from women? Because we know that very oftentimes, a behavior that will be deemed brave or courageous from a man will not be judged the same way at all when it comes from a woman. It will be deemed aggressive when it comes from a woman, and it will be deemed brave or confident when it comes from a man, for example. So you'll learn how to deconstruct all of that and look at what's the leadership model that you want to promote within your organization, and how do you adjust your own behavior in order to make that happen. You will gain more perspective. And new perspectives. You will communicate with skills that support inclusion and belonging. So you will learn how to communicate, how to talk, how to express yourself in a way that fosters inclusion and belonging. You will test inclusive leadership styles and behavior. And finally, you will create and sustain belonging. So throughout all those different factors, and those things that are necessary in order to really change an organizational culture, coaching will be your ally and your support. Because as we said from the start, it's not just about one type of action. It's not just about doing one thing to support women in leadership. It has to be systemic. It has to be a global, multifaceted, multi-tiered approach in order to see real change. And coaching can really help achieve that by touching upon all those different dimensions in the organization.
Okay, let's go ahead and keep going. I want to make sure we have time for questions to get through everything.
Yeah, definitely. So here I wanted to talk about, the typical and critical moments that will kind of occur in women's career. And I wanted to also stress that, especially for that, coaching is also particularly relevant and meaningful in order to support women at every stage of their career. So first, hiring and recruiting. This is especially essential, and internal roles are essential to eliminate hiring biases when it comes to talent acquisition leaders, employer branding leaders, managers of the open position, for example, a sales director or a manager. Coaching will help people in these roles to be curious about their own biases and how those could impact the hiring process and the hiring sequence. And so you will be able to support women throughout the hiring process to make sure that they actually have access to all of the opportunities and that they're able to apply and be considered and be hired for all of these opportunities. When you look at onboarding is such a critical moment of any employee's journey in an organization. And whenever onboarding doesn't go well, you have people leaving right away. And there's actually a statistic from Brandon Hall. Inclusive and fair onboarding based on a strong gender neutral process can improve the retention of new hires by 82%. So this is actually really interesting and important. And so coaching will help you achieve that and actually improve the onboarding experience for your new hires making sure that, each team member is considered, each team member is given the right psychological safe workplace to thrive and to have a great positive experience throughout their onboarding. Performance boost. So improved performance, of course, is one of the key strategies that women can focus on in the midst of their tenure at a company to grow and to kind of climb that corporate ladder. And it's especially important to support women in those stages by creating bias-free performance reviews, for example, by making sure that women are supported to increase their performance. And all of that can be supported very strongly through coaching. There's the career growth phase where, most women are expected to be caregivers, and you have to support them also whenever that happens. So when it's career growth, whether it's maternity leave or other caregiving roles, it's extremely key to be able to support women through coaching. So for example, at CoachHub, we've been really successful creating programs for pre-maternity leave and post-maternity leave. Typically, those are moments where women can feel particularly vulnerable, can be a little bit at loss as to how they should behave, what they should be doing in order to succeed at each of those phases. And having the ability and the space to talk about this with a coach can be especially meaningful and important in order to become reassured and more sure of yourself when you're going through those challenging life transitions, I would say. And finally, navigating organizational politics. I'm not going to go back to this, but we've discussed it already a little bit, but coaching can be especially impactful and meaningful when navigating those organizational politics by having that sounding board and by having that kind of close relationship with someone that's completely neutral that can support you when you're navigating those as well.
Go ahead and move on.
So just overall, as I mentioned, digital coaching really embraces diversity and fosters inclusion as a tool, as a method, as an approach. Coaches can develop their own solutions that are tailored to their respective context, personalization to the highest level. They can become more self-reflective and aware of unconscious bias. It will create a sense of belonging through coaches' perception of quality, meaning, and satisfaction. And finally, uniqueness is totally recognized and accepted for all individuals of all backgrounds, experience, skills, personalities, values, and ambition. And I think that is in a few words to summarize what really makes digital coaching the best possible tool to support diversity and inclusion in any organization.
Yeah, and it goes both ways in terms of that with a sense of belonging, with regards to leaders who bring up the topic of how do you make sure that my team feels more sense of belonging, or if when I coach BIPOC, Black and Indigenous people of color, they often feel, well, how can I really bring my whole self to work and not just a part of myself to work? So through coaching process, they have tools and strategies. They realize all the tools and strategies in terms of how to deal with that and how to have those difficult conversations if needed, right? To confront, to deal with certain politics, things like that also as well, which Leslie has mentioned in the previous slide. So it has always been helpful for both the leaders and the team members as well.
Great. And so let's, we're almost toward the end and we want to try to save some time for questions. So, but first a real quick poll, if you don't mind. And that is, now that you've heard some of all this, we want to get a sense of where your organization is in terms of coaching for high potential women. So does your organization offer coaching for high potential women? Is it yes at all levels? Yes, but only at the senior and executive levels? Yes, beginning at mid-level on up? Yes, but more or less on just kind of an ad hoc basis, or no, coaching is not being offered right now for women or leaders of women. So we'll wait for a couple of seconds for people to weigh in and see where we stand. And we've got a, let's see. So for about a quarter of people, a little bit more, it's not being offered now. So hopefully this will give you some inspiration and motivation to maybe look into it. 27% are doing it on a ad hoc basis. And then it's great to see that also about a quarter are doing it at all levels. And then about a quarter doing it at the starting at mid-level or only at the senior and executive level. So quite a range, and a lot of room for continued development of coaching. So we want to wrap up with a quick case study. And do you want to set the scene for us, Leslie, and then we'll provide a little detail. Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, just an example of the work we've been able to do with one of our clients, Woodward, 153-year-old independent designer, manufacturer, and service provider of energy control and optimization solutions for aerospace and industrial markets. Only 30% of manufacturing employees are women. So there's really a diversity issue in that field specifically. And only 1 in 4 leaders in manufacturing are women. With our help, Woodward is really working on changing that. They partnered with CoachHub to support women in their Woodward Women Lead with customized one-on-one coaching. And we have a short video that I think will tell the story much better than I ever could, with actual testimonials from people benefiting from coaching at Woodward. So if we could play that.
Let's give it a shot. Are you seeing it?
Nope.
Hmm.
There we go. We don't have
No
this
sound though.
Claude.
You're not seeing it?
We're seeing it, but we're not hearing it.
Yeah, we're not hearing it.
How about now?
Nope.
No?
And we have German subtitles too.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, do you want to give us an overview? I apologize for that. It seemed to be playing well before.
Yeah, absolutely. So just of an overview, you have about 30 female participants that went through 9 months of coaching. And part of the Woodward Lead program is actually Lead, Empower, Advocate, Develop. So the participants are high potential, most engaged member of the female leadership team who showed the strongest desire to participate in a coaching program. And this program is helping each participant develop from a self, team, and business perspective. So the coaching program is intended to help leaders become pioneers for change and innovation within their team and at the company, which is somewhat a male-dominated industry, as we've covered before. So the satisfaction score from the participants is 5 out of 5. And I just have a couple of quotes that I'm going to read that are actually coming from the women that benefited from coaching. My coach is fantastic at helping me work out how to approach the obstacles I face at work. Her way of provoking deeper thought has been truly invaluable to helping me grow in new areas of my leadership. Or someone else saying, I have been facing some adversity with my team and working through scenarios and what I can personally impact in the workplace with my coach. And that has been key to my own success and my team's success. So just to show, I think those 2 quotes especially show how personalized and how adapted women coaching for women can be, even though it's part of a broader program and part of a company-wide initiative. What happens in the coaching session is always unique and always personalized to individual challenges and topic. And I think that's what makes it so much more powerful and so much more impactful.
Great, thank you. And we've just got a few minutes for questions. And so we've got some really good ones. Let's start with Sabrina asks about, as hierarchies begin to flatten, how can you assure leaders that building other capable leaders doesn't mean that they are ceding their authority or making them useless? Some leaders are still driven by the power dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question, Sabrina. What I can tell you is that coaching can help with that. That would be my answer for everything. No, but it's true. I mean, I think that especially when you look at, ego management, building empathy and developing awareness of what actually is important, coaching is extremely helpful. And so I think it would have exactly that effect of actually allowing each individual to look at what really drives you and to kind of let go of that power dynamic driven aspect that some people can still have in the organization, and focus more on other more sustainable sources of satisfaction in the workplace.
This is also why we really advocate for inclusive leader training, which includes a coaching element, because you have to get across to the leaders that you're not giving up authority. You're involving more people and helping you make a better decision. That's really what this is all about. And also having people feel like they are part of the solution. It makes them part of the team. And then not everybody catches on to that or understands that, or their ego gets in the way. So that's where the coaching really comes in, to really help them work through some of those issues.
And not just that, coaching helps with not just the leader, but if you coach the employee under the leader that's receiving this treatment, there's also coaching to how to manage upwards, to coach upwards your leader, how to make him or her realize these things, right? To make sure that, you know, it is helpful both ways also as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Here's one. How do you ensure coaching isn't happening in a vacuum? How are these great insights being shared across an organization to actually change the culture?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first, I want to remind us that coaching is confidential. So what happens in a coaching session will not be shared in the broader organization. However, part of the reason why coaching is becoming digital and is being done through online platforms is to democratize coaching. And that's actually kind of our vision at CoachHub. That you can build workplaces where literally everyone is being coached. And that's actually true at CoachHub. All 700 plus employees are coached. And that changes the culture from within organically, because when every single employee is spending time weekly or monthly working on themselves, you don't even have to do anything else. That already changes the culture organically, and that already kind of ignites a behavioral change within everybody, where you're forced to be more introspective, to look at your work, to ask yourself some question, to confront your perspective. And so organically, the culture just evolves and changes. However, a lot of it is being captured on the individual level through a platform where you can take notes, where you can track your goals and your objectives, as I say, and then you can kind of render anonymous some of the insights that you're gathering at a company level to learn more about the trends that are happening within your own organization. So for example, what kind of topics from a macro perspective are your employees working on? And those types of information can really be invaluable to ignite a culture change even further.
And at the risk of running a minute or so over, let's try one more question. How do you approach people who may be part of the reason for keeping this issue stuck? We can't force people to change, and those people might not think they need coaching.
Yeah, that's a great one. Maybe Wilma, you want to take this one and talk about people who don't think they need coaching, because I'm sure you've encountered some of them in your career.
Yeah, I have actually. For example, especially if it's a coaching program that's given to people who may need performance coaching, like Claude had mentioned, oftentimes you don't think they need to be coached, or they have all the answers because they've been in the company for over 30 years. But usually it's through coaching, through a deep dive coaching process of asking them a lot of open-ended questions to go deeper dive, they realize, oh, they don't really know everything. And then they also realize, oh, okay, I actually need to change myself for this issue to not be stuck. And then that's when the light bulb moment happens through coaching. And that's when they go, oh, okay, I do need to change that so that my environment doesn't feel stuck, or my subordinates or leaders doesn't feel I'm stuck also as well. So oftentimes coaching is where it helps to really bring out the root causes of those behavior to make sure that they change and have that self-awareness, be mindful of it as well.
I've seen many cases where somebody is initially uncoachable or doesn't want to be coached, and then continues to run into problems in their job, and then come back and realize maybe they do need help. But there's always a few dissenters, but mostly it works with a little bit of help, as Wilma suggested.
Yeah,
unfortunately, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, if the senior leaders are doing it and talking about it, that also helps a lot. So if you kind of model the coaching behavior in your organization, have the CEO or the VPs talk about the fact that they're going through coachings and they're still learning from it, that can also encourage some of the people that might be a little bit more resistant to think, if the top leaders in the company are doing it, maybe I should give it a try as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. Everything starts at the top, right? So if a good example is set, it tends to roll downhill. We'll have to leave it there. I want to thank Leslie and Wilma. You've been great. Thank you for a great session. Thank you, especially to all of you, for taking the time out of your busy days to join us. We hope you'll join us for another Brandon Hall Group webinar soon. Thanks. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks again to CoachHub. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.